Yes, as the video title suggests, we are going to see the interview questions based on the Angular. This video will mainly focus on the basic interview questions. If you are having experience with 0 to 2 years of experience, so this is the right video for you. We are not going into we are not going into deep in all the topics. We will just cover the famous interview questions and what should be your answer. Okay, so whenever Angular interview starts, so they will first ask like how Angular is different when we compare with JavaScript or jQuery, with the traditional scripting applications we have apart from React and extension, all other technologies. Okay, so first thing you can tell, like if you compare with JavaScript and jQuery, how we used to interact with the HTML is like with JavaScript. We used to first select the element with document.get element by ID, then we have to provide the ID, then dot value. Consider like if one text box is there and you want to get the value of the text box, so this was the syntax for it. In case of jQuery, it was something little bit different. Again, it was initially getting converted into plain JavaScript only. But and one more thing, like while this is for the getting value from the text box and this is to set the value. Okay, so but in case of Angular, we have different types of bindings. Let's say just for a text box example, if you want to set the value and the get the value from the text box, all you have to do is just you have to create one variable and assign that variable with the ng model directive. So you don't have to worry about ID, class, this all syntax. Just with this ng model directive, all things will be happening. Okay, one more issue, like let's say some values got changed, and that value, if you have to render it on the HTML again you have to call this line, right? But in Angular with the two-way binding, you don't have to again do this. Once this variable value changes, it automatically renders into the browser. So that is the only advantage you can tell when someone asks you like how Angular is different. Okay, moving on to next question. So this is just a key components of Angular. Let's say we have components, then modules are there, templates are there, services are there, directives and pipes. Okay, so these are, while if anyone asks you like major modules we have in Angular, so you can just name it down. Then components. So components are nothing but directives which has the template. Okay, component are also a directive which has a template. Then you can tell like components are the basic building block of UI Angular app which forms the tree of Angular component. Okay, and it has a template. So this question's done. Then difference between component and the directive, as we have said, like component is kind of a directive. So the only difference is like we have HTML template in case of a component directive, and with directive we don't have the HTML template. And while designing component, we have to get the metadata decorator at the rate component, and directive we can have at the rate directive. One more difference, only one component can be present per DOM element. Okay, but we can add multiple directive on one element. Let's say we have a text box and we have a directive to highlight that, we have a directive for validation, so we can add multiple directive on a single element. So that is the difference. Template. So template is just a part of the HTML view which we bind to a component, where we show all the properties and all forms and ngFor, ngip, all everything we use. Okay, what is module? So Angular basically builds on the modular structure. So you can say like modules are the logical boundaries in your application. The application is divided into separate modules to separate the functionality. When we talk about the lazy loading, we have different number of modules. When we don't have the lazy loading, we will have only app.module. Okay, simple definition, it is a place where you can group components, directives, pipes, services which are related to that particular application. Okay, so module is a way to group all the component, directive, pipe, and services, and external modules also. TypeScript. So TypeScript is nothing but a superset of JavaScript created by Microsoft, which what we can say follows some of the OOP concept. Let's say classes, types, interface, async, await, and many other features. Okay. Then Angular CLI. So Angular CLI name depicts CLI means command line interface. we have to install this in our system with this is the command npm install angular cli. Okay, so with this, whenever you run application, you have to, in the command prompt you can run some command like ng serve. When you have to create the component, ng generate component, your component. So all these commands are supported if you have installed angular cli. Okay, otherwise you have to, let's say you have to create the component, you have to create all the files manually and write the code. But if you run the command, you get all basic code, scaffolding code ready. Okay, so that is the use of angular cli. Then yeah, that's it. Again, angular.json file. So when someone goes through like what are the files we have, okay, so you can tell like angular.json is a configuration file where we keep all the external css javascripts files which we are going to use. Then build configuration like what should be my maximum warning, maximum error. Okay, when we run the application, by default it run on the localhost 4200, but let's say if we have to run that on some different port, so that we can provide in a angular.json file. Then you might have seen an environment folder. Suppose your application has two or three environments. Let's say qa environment is there, uat environment is there, and prod environment is there. So for all these environments, some configuration can be different. Let's say api endpoints will be different, like, so you can create all three environment files and create all environment related some specific what you can say constant into that particular file. Okay, this is about angular.json. One more file is package.json. So package.json contains entries of all the packages which you are going to use into your Angular project. Okay. Then tsconfig file. Tsconfig file, as we know, like we in Angular we work with the TypeScript. So tsconfig file is nothing but compilation configuration. Okay. So let's say you want to just disable some things when compiling. Skip library check or strict null check. Okay, let's say you are just uh, picking some value from array and then you are using it. So without checking like it is null or not, you are trying to assign, so it will throw the error. So we can disable that with strict null check. Okay, skip default library check. If you are using any third-party library and that is not compatible with your current Angular version, so while compiling or while taking out the build, it will throw the error like this library is not compatible with the latest Angular. So you can skip that error by using this flag. Okay, main.ts. So main.ts is responsible to start our Angular application because in main.ts we have a reference of app module. Okay, and in app module we have a reference of our bootstrap component, like which component we have to run first. Let's say what else. Okay, one more interview question will be in package.json we have two, what you can say, two major section, dependencies and dev dependencies. Both are having packages, but in dependencies we have the packages which are needed to run locally as well as on the environment when we deploy the build. Let's say all the packages, Angular packages, Bootstrap, PrimeNG, all the external packages you install. But in dev dependencies, you get all the packages which are needed to run the application locally only. Okay, so those packages are part of the Angular build when you deploy the application. So these are all the basic concept. Now let's move on to components. So when we talk about components, everyone will ask for the lifecycle hooks of the component. So it's better to list down all the lifecycle hooks, let's say ng on changes and in a sequence. Ng on changes, ng on init, ng do check, ng after content init, ng after content check, view init, view checked, and ng destroy. Okay, a quick tip, like before interviewer asks you further questions on this, it will be a wise choice to answer some of its own. Let's say you, because if he asks you like what are the differences between these two from ng do check to ng after view init, so you might get confused. So it's better to upfrontly tell them like when we use ng on changes, ng on init, and ng destroy. If you tell this, interviewer might skip all these questions. So ng on changes is the event if any value get changed, this event will trigger. ng on init when the component has done the initialization. ng on destroy when the component is being destroyed. Let's say we have one route and we are redirecting to another route. So when we are redirecting, this event will initialize. One more you can answer ng after view init. Let's say you are dealing with the view child and you want to get the value of that view child, so that code should be into your ng after view init, because this is the event which get triggers when the components view and child views are being initialized. Okay, then change detection. So just for the knowing purpose, we can say like we have two change detection strategies. One is the default and second is the on push. Don't go in detail because again there will be more questions. So in component, first lifecycle hooks was the first question. Then second question is data binding, like what types of data bindings we have. Okay, so we can categorize into three. First is from component to the DOM, means HTML. From component to the HTML. First is interpolation, means double curly bracket. Then property binding with square bracket. Then from DOM, means HTML to the .ts, we have event. So from HTML to .ts, we have the event. The next is two-way binding, that is with the ng model. Okay, so these are the only three ways data bindings we have. Okay, next question, component decorator is also there. So you can say like decorator allows you to mark the Angular class as a components or what. So decorators are basically, it tells the Angular like what type of the class is. At the rate component decorator is there, at the rate injectable decorator is there, at the rate module decorator is there. Okay, so in the component decorator we have n number of properties. You might have seen selector, which is the default identifier of our component. Then template URL you might have seen, where we passed our Angular that component HTML file reference. Then style URL, it's an array of style files. Now either you can use style URL or you can use style. Either you can use template URL or you can use template. If you know like just a div or two or three divs, a very small HTML code is there. So rather than creating separate template URL, you can write the template that in HTML file, HTML code into template itself. Then interpolation providers, if you have some services that you are going to use as a singleton into your particular component, then you can use the provider. Okay, remaining properties you better not to go in detail. Okay, view child, let's skip this. Let's come to directives. Okay, so directives, the basic definition is directives add behavior to an existing DOM element or an existing component system. So this should be your definition of the directive. Directives add behavior to existing DOM element and existing component instance. One more I will we have here, multiple directives can be applied over a single element. This is just a sample example of our custom directive. Let's say highlight directive. Okay, so you can see directive decorator is there and selector is my highlight. So we have an input parameter, then element reference. So whenever I hover on this particular paragraph, I will get. So this is how it will work. So anyone might ask you like what are the default directives we have. So router outlet is kind of a directive, router link also a directive, view child, ng model, ng switch, these are all directives. Okay, the next question, what are the types of directives? We have four types of directives. First one is the structural. Structural means it is responsible to add or remove element from the DOM. Examples are ngIf and ngFor, because they ngIf what it does, it removes the particular element from the DOM and it add also. ngFor, it add new element, right? Attribute directive. Attribute directives are responsible to add extra behavior to an existing element. It doesn't add or remove the element from the DOM. It just add extra behavior, means ng class and ng style. These are the two built-in types of directive. Next is component. So we can say component is also a directive with a template. Then obviously you can create your custom directives, like the example which we have here. This is an example of custom directive. Okay, host listener we can avoid. Then pipe. So when we say pipes are just a simple functions which execute in the HTML template. okay, and return a transform value. So we use pipe just to transform the value while showing it into the HTML template. So default pipes like date pipe, uppercase, lowercase, currency, async, and slice. Okay, if you want to create your custom pipe, so you just have to create command is ng generate pipe, then your pipe name. So you will get this decorator at the red pipe and name of the pipe. Then you will get a transform method implemented. It will have two parameters. First is the value and second will be the argument array. Then you can write logic here. Okay. Pure and impure pipe, someone might ask. So pure pipe is only called when Angular detect a change in the value or the parameter passed to the pipe. Okay. Let's say we have a date and we have added the date pipe. So if the date change, then only that pipe will execute again. But in case of impure pipe, any of the variables in that component change, okay, or the binding change and change detection occur, then all that pipe will execute. Doesn't matter that value is changed or not. So you can say like impure pipe, what we can say, degrade the performance because for every change detection it is going to execute again and again. Doesn't matter like its value is changed or not because same output it is going to get. Okay, parameterized pipe, so we can send the parameter like this with colon and the parameter. So this is the date pipe, we can send the format of the date like this. Chain pipe, multiple pipes we can change. You can see this is the date pipe, then uppercase pipe. Execution will be from left to the right. Someone might ask like what will be the execution sequence if we have multiple pipes. So from left to the right. Okay, async pipe. So async pipe is the pipe which subscribe to an observable. Let's say we have created this observable time. Okay, it is just emitting next time. You can see date time and 2000 time. After 2000, it is going to emit the point with observable.next. So time, this is the observable which will emit the data after every 2 seconds. So this we can subscribe in the HTML like this. Okay. Okay, one more interview question if someone might ask like what is the difference if we call pipe in .ts and HTML. Like in .ts also we can execute the pipe. Okay, the difference is if we call the pipe in .ts it will modify the actual value, but when we implement the pipe in HTML it won't modify the actual value. Okay, so these are all the questions we have related to pipe. Since it is a small topic, so we don't have that much question. So these are the everything anyone can ask. Then services. So services are nothing but a class which we create to store some common functionality, right? The definition is service is used when a common functionality needs to be provided to the various modules of the component. Okay, so service we normally use to note down all our API calls functions. We create all our API call functions in the service, and that service we use over the multiple components. Okay, that is the only definition anyone will ask. One more, dependency injection. We might have seen here dependency injection. Yes, so when we integrate our service into our component, we have to integrate that in the constructor. In the constructor round bracket, we say like private, let's say master service is there, so master colon master service. So that what we do in the constructor is a dependency injection. So dependency injection is a pattern where class asks for its dependencies from the external sources. Means what are the dependents class we need when we execute that particular component that we provide in the constructor. So this is dependency injection. Simple definition is an important application design pattern in which class asks for the dependencies from external sources rather than creating itself. So then you don't have to create object of that service and destroy that by your own. Dependency injection framework will take care of that. Okay. Next, routing. So when we talk about the routing is the what we can say powerful JavaScript router built by the Angular team. Okay, since you know Angular is a single page application, so everything that we do it's in that HTML single app root directive. Okay, but what if we have to achieve the navigation? So we can achieve the navigation using router package. Okay, so what you can say, next different things comes with Angular, like router outlet. So router outlet is a, what you can say, directive which is responsible to render activated route. Okay, so router outlet is a directive which is responsible to render activated route. Then router links. So in traditional normal application we used to use href, but in Angular, while working with Angular, we have to use router link, and then you have to provide the route name. This basically gets converted to href when we compile the application. Okay, active routes. So you might have wondering, like, let's say we have multiple navbar, and when we click on the particular route, that should get highlighted, right? So we can use this router link active, then we have to provide the class name. If this route is activated, this class will be activated. This class will be attached to this anchor tag. Okay, so you don't have to write specific on click event then store the activated route. So you can get rid of that code and just use router link active. So as a router is a separate library, so we get events also. So most of the events like navigation start, activation start, resolve end. So this number of router events are there. Activated route. Consider like you are having query parameter in your route and you want to get the data out of that. So you can create an instance of this activated route service and read the query params. Okay. So how do we define the route? Route is nothing but a collection of objects where we have path and the component. Okay, so this is the route with parameter. You can see to do is my route name slash colon ID. So this route is having one parameter. Okay, and component is like on this route which component we have to render. Okay, next is simple. This is a path component. If we want to save some data into particular route, then we can store like this. In data, we can store the key value pair data. Okay, empty route. Empty route is being used. Suppose we don't have any route in the directive. So which component we have to load? So as you can see, if this is empty, with redirect to property, we can redirect. If no activated route is there, we can redirect to to-dos route. That will be here or here. Okay. Then what I can say, wildcard route, star star. If there is no route and let's say to do is also not found, if no route is found, then we page not found component will be loaded. Okay. After selecting this route, you just have to mention that in the router module.for route and you have to provide the routes. One more important type, guards. So when we implement login, we have to restrict the route if user is not authenticated. When route user is trying to access the route and if he is not authenticated, we have to restrict it. So we can do that with using guards. Okay, so we have to create the guards. Simple CLI command is ng generate guard, then your guard name, let's say auth. Okay, so if you name the auth, so this file will be created. Then it will ask you like which type of guard you need. So can activate is a guard. If we click on the any particular route, then that before activating that route, it will go to here, and here we can check if, let's say after login we are storing some values in the local storage and session storage, so we can add a check here like this value is present or not. If it is present, we can return true, or otherwise we can return false or return to any other specific route. Okay, so we different types of guards are can activate child, can deactivate, resolve, and can load. Okay, that's it. One more, like if we have the query parameter, how do we read it? Let's say this is kind of a route. Edit is my route name and student ID is my parameter. So while navigating, I will use this dot router navigate edit and then pass the 1 2 3. So in component where student data component, we will create an instance of activated route. This dot activated route params dot subscribe. So we can subscribe to the whatever the query parameters we have. Okay, that's it with the routing. Next is forms. So when we talk about forms, we have two types of form, template and the reactive. Template is like the forms which we build with the ng model, and reactive which we build with form controller name. So just a clear difference between these two. Template forms are suitable for the simple scenarios and fail for the complex scenarios. Okay, complex scenarios as in suppose you have employee form and inside that employee form you have multiple family details. So this is a complex form scenario. NG model will fail into that. Obviously it will work, but it will have not that what I can say good approach to work. Then with template form, two-way data binding is possible because we work with the NG model. So NG model directive allows two-way data binding. In component side, we don't have to do that much of code, okay, and automatically tracks the form and its data also. In case of reactive, it is mainly what I can say useful in a complex scenarios where validations are very pretty windy. Then I have explained like employee and the dynamic form. Again, dynamic forms are the one of the use. Then in case of reactive, we have to do more code on the component side and less code in the HTML. Okay, so we use reactive when we have to add the elements dynamically. Okay, so this is the basic question. One might ask like how do we create reactive forms? So you can see we have to create the form instance with form group. Then this dot my form is equal to new form group. Inside that we can create our different controls. Okay, then in HTML changes you have to use the form tag. In on the form tag you have to use the form group and provide the form name which we have declared here. And then on the each control we have to use, instead of ng model we have to use form controller name, and this will be all the controls which we have created. Okay, then set value. Let's say if we have to set and get the value, so we can set the value like this dot new form controls, then specific control set value and pass the value. Okay, then this is like adding how we can add a dynamic element. This doesn't what we can say when we are targeting for basic, it doesn't matter because this is an advanced topic. Next is HTTP client. So what is HTTP client? Now when we work with the Angular, our APIs will be developed with .NET, Java or any technologies, but it will work on the HTTP protocol. All right. So to communicate to the API which are developed on the HTTP protocol, we have to use HTTP client library. So how do we use? First, we have to add the HTTP client module in our app module and add it in the import statement. Then we have to create instance of our HTTP client service. Then we have different methods like get, post, put, delete. All that we can use. Okay. One might have asked like what are the HTTP interceptors? So interceptors comes from the HTTP client. Interceptors, what it does, it monitors all the incoming and outgoing requests. Means we can use that for the authentication purpose, logging, catching, fake backend, and modifying the headers also. So for HTTP interceptor, you can say like when you have to send the token with all the requests. Let's say after logging, you get some particular token that user is authenticated, and you need to send that token with all the requests. So you can implement interceptor and send the token. Okay. So in your app module, you have to provide interceptor like this, and this is the basic interceptor. This will be a simple class which will implement HTTP interceptor, intercept method. Then it will have two parameter, request and the next. Okay. Yes. So that is all the questions we have here. Then let's say RxJS. So when working with the Angular, we normally we don't go for the what you can say promise what we have in plain JavaScript. We depend on the RxJS library. So RxJS is a library for composing asynchronous and the callback based code. Let's say we are making an API call and we have to wait and then perform some step once we get the response. So in this scenario, we use RxJS. Okay. So there we have observable. So observable is a unique object similar to the promise that help async code. An observable instance begin publishing the values when someone subscribes to it. So you need to subscribe by calling subscribe method. Let's say this is an observable which is emitting some data. So to get the data from this observable, you need to subscribe like this observable.subscribe. Okay. Then difference between promise and observable. So promise emits a single value, but observable emits multiple values or multiple period of time. Promises are not lazy. Once they are declared, they will immediately start emitting the data unless some function is subscribing to you. I mean, some function is listening to it. It will always start emitting the data. But in case of observable, unless some function is subscribing to it, it won't be active. Okay, promises cannot be cancelled, but in case of observable, we have unsubscribe method, so we can cancel the incoming object, right? Since our observable comes from the RxJS, we get different number of operators. Let's say for each, reduce, retry, pipe, and all number of operators are there. So before returning the data to the subscriber, we can format the data. Next, yeah, so that's it with the RxJS. Then compiler and builds. So someone will ask like, what is just-in-time, JIT or AOT? So just these are the build compilation techniques we have. Just-in-time is a compilation that compiles your app in the browser at the runtime. JIT, sorry, yeah. So if we have the compilation type as JIT, so browse application will compile at the browser time, okay, at the runtime. But when you do the AOT, in AOT, the compilation compiles the application at the build time. It means when you take the build, that code is already in the compiled form. Okay, but in the just in time, it will be compiled at the browser level when it is being rendered. Okay. Advantage of AOT: faster rendering, fewer asynchronous requests, smaller Angular download size. You get very small build size when you take the build with AOT. Then template errors will be shown at the compile time only. That's it. Let's say what do we have? Random. These are all again advanced topic. So